For over 70 years, he was a ghost, a man with no name, no past, just found on a remote Australian beach. His story? It became one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries, packed with cryptic clues, unbreakable codes, and all sorts of Cold War speculation. So today, we're going to unpack how modern science finally gave him a name. Okay, our story starts right here. It's December 1st, 1948, on Somerton Beach in Adelaide, Australia. A man is found slumped against the seawall, and get this, he's dressed in a perfectly pressed suit. Now, to anyone just walking by, he might have looked like he was just taking a nap, but he was dead. And believe me, the closer the police looked, the stranger things got. And this one question? Wow, it would haunt investigators for generations. Who was this man? Every single lead went cold. Every clue just led to another question. For 74 long years, he was known only by the place he was found, the Somerton Man.
All right, so let's rewind and start right where the police did, with a body on the beach and, well, a complete lack of answers. So get this, every single label on his clothing had been meticulously, carefully snipped off. There was no wallet, no money, no ID, absolutely nothing to even hint at who he was. Police ran his fingerprints, they checked dental records against every database they could think of. The result? Zilch. Nothing. It was literally as if this man had just dropped out of the sky.
The case was a total brick wall. But just when it seemed hopeless, investigators started finding these clues. Clues so bizarre, they turned a simple mystery into an absolute legend.
Okay, so months go by, and the investigation is going nowhere. Then, a pathologist is re-examining the man's trousers and feels something odd. It was this tiny little fob pocket, secretly stitched right inside the waistband, something everyone had missed. And inside? Well, that's where they found the first real clue.
It was a tiny rolled-up scrap of paper, and on it were these two words, Tamam Shud. Now that's a Persian phrase, and it translates to, it is ended, or it is finished. Turns out those are the final words from a really famous collection of poems, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam.
And this is where the rabbit hole gets really deep. The police eventually found the exact book that the scrap was torn from. It had been just tossed into a car near the beach. And in the back of that book, penciled onto the page, was this series of letters. A code. I'm telling you, the world's best code breakers have tried to crack it for decades, and not one of them has succeeded.
So let's recap. The police have a dead man, a cryptic poetic sign-off, and a completely unbreakable code. The case itself went cold, but boy, the speculation was just heating up.
And things got quiet for a long time. After the initial investigation kind of fizzled out in '49, decades just passed with no real progress. The case became folklore, like a campfire story. That is, until 2021, when a real long-shot gamble was finally taken.
And in that long silence, of course, the theories took over. People started asking, was he a Soviet spy, silenced after passing a coded message? Or maybe a jilted lover who died from some kind of slow-acting, untraceable poison? That whole Tamam Shud thing made a lot of people think it was an elaborate suicide. The mystery was basically a blank canvas, and believe me, everyone had a theory.
But after more than 70 years of nothing but pure speculation, forensic science was finally about to get its turn.
So, in May of 2021, a crane actually lifted the coffin of the Somerton Man from the ground. Now, the goal was simple, but really difficult. Find just a few strands of hair with intact roots. That would be enough, hopefully, to extract a DNA profile, and then use modern genetic genealogy to build a family tree that might, just might, finally lead to a name. And look, even the police knew it was a total long shot, but it was the best shot they'd had in over 70 years. And after some absolutely painstaking work, a team of researchers, well, they managed to do it. They found the DNA they needed and began that long, complicated process of tracing it back through history.
Then, in July of 2022, the breakthrough came. The ghost finally got a name.
And this is what's so wild, just how different the myth was from the actual man. The Somerton Man wasn't some spy or an international man of mystery. He was Carl Charles Webb, an electrical instrument maker born in 1905 in a suburb of Melbourne, the youngest of 6 kids, just a regular guy at the center of this extraordinary mystery.
And as researchers started digging into his life, a pretty somber picture began to form. It seems Carl Webb's life was just shadowed by grief. I mean, in the decade right before his death, he lost his father, his mother, his brother Roy, who died in a Japanese POW camp, and his nephew John, who was killed in action with the Air Force. Just one tragedy after another.
So, a name has been put to the ghost. That should be the end of the story, right? Well, not quite. Because giving the Somerton Man an identity didn't solve the mystery. In a lot of ways, it actually deepened it.
Think about it. We know who he was, but we have no idea why Carl Webb, a guy from Melbourne, ended up on that beach in Adelaide. We still don't know how he died. Poison was always the top theory, but it was never proven. And most of all, we still don't have a clue what that code means, or why this ordinary guy was carrying that final cryptic message, "It is finished."
So, the identity of the Somerton Man isn't a puzzle anymore. But the story of Carl Webb, the actual man, his life, his final days, and whatever secrets he carried with him, that mystery is very, very much alive. We finally know his name, but we still don't know his story.